the night of November 15, 1959, the quiet town of Holcomb, Kansas, was forever changed. It was a place where neighbors knew one another, where the doors of homes were rarely locked, and the peaceful rhythm of rural life went largely uninterrupted. But that night, under the cover of darkness, a brutal crime would unfold, one so chilling that it would shake not only Holcomb, but the entire nation. This is the tragic and horrifying story of the Clutter Family Murders, a senseless act of violence that would inspire you one of the most famous true crime books in history, In Cold Blood. The Clutter Family. The Clutter family was well respected and admired in Holcomb. Herbert Clutter was a successful farmer known for his hard work and dedication to his community. He was the kind of man who helped his neighbors and took care of his land with unwavering commitment. His wife, Bonnie, was kind-hearted but struggled with mental illness, which kept her largely confined to their home. Their children, Nancy and Kenyon, were teenagers who were loved by their peers. Nancy was a charming and popular high school student, while Kenyon was a quieter, introverted boy. Together, they were the epitome of a peaceful, prosperous family. But on that fateful night, their lives would be violently and tragically cut short. The killers. The story of the Clutter family's death begins with two men, Richard Dick Hickock and Perry Smith, both of whom had troubled pasts marked by violence, deception, and crime. Richard Hickock, a former prison inmate, was a man driven by greed. While serving time in Kansas State Penitentiary, Hickock struck up a conversation with a fellow inmate, Floyd Wells. During their exchange, Wells mentioned that Herbert Clutter, a successful farmer, allegedly kept a large sum of money locked away in a safe at his home. This sparked an idea in Hickock's mind, an idea that would soon lead to disaster. Hickock, eager to find an easy way to get rich, sought out a partner in crime, and he found one in Perry Smith. Smith was a drifter with a dark history shaped by childhood abuse, mental illness, and emotional trauma. He had spent much of his life bouncing from one failed venture to another, and he became Hickock's accomplice in a plot that would leave Holcomb reeling. Together, Hickock and Smith planned to break into the Clutter family home, steal whatever money they could find, and leave no witnesses behind. They believed that Clutter's supposed safe would contain a fortune, but what they didn't know was that the Clutters didn't even have a safe. They were about to commit a senseless and horrific crime, one that would cost the lives of 4 innocent people. The night of the murders. On the night of November 15, 1959, the two men made their way to the Clutter household, armed with a shotgun and a rifle, fully intending to carry out their plan. They approached the house under the cover of darkness, cutting the phone lines to ensure their victims couldn't call for help. Once inside, they quickly tied up Herbert Clutter and his family. At first, everything seemed to go according to plan. But as the night wore on, the killers realized there was no safe. There was no hidden fortune waiting for them. They had entered the Clutter home under false pretenses, and now their greed, mixed with frustration, would lead them to violence. What followed next was truly chilling. In the quiet of that rural Kansas home, with the family helpless and bound, Perry Smith shot Herbert Clutter in the head at close range. Then he moved on to Bonnie Clutter, shooting her as well. The two teenagers, Nancy and Kenyon, were also killed in the same cold-blooded manner. The entire family, innocent and unsuspecting, was murdered. 4 lives snuffed out in a matter of minutes, for little more than pocket change and a few small items. The investigation. In the days following the murders, Holcomb was thrown into turmoil. The small town, which had always been known for its peace and tight-knit community, now found itself grappling with an unimaginable tragedy. Sheriff Earl W. DeWitt and his team of investigators were stumped. There were no obvious leads, no footprints, no fingerprints, just an eerily quiet house and a family that had been brutally murdered without any apparent reason. But the investigation soon took a turn. Floyd Wells, who had once shared his knowledge of the Clutters with Hickock, came forward and identified the killers. His testimony became a pivotal moment in the case. The authorities tracked down Hickock and Smith, who had fled to Las Vegas, where they were arrested just days before the new year. Once arrested, the two men confessed to the killings, offering chilling details of the crime. Smith's account was filled with anger and delusion, while Hickock appeared unfazed by the gravity of what he had done. They both were charged with multiple counts of murder. The trial and execution. The trial of Hickock and Smith began in 1960. Both men were found guilty of the Clutter family's murders. The crime was so heinous that there was little question about their guilt, and they were sentenced to death. The verdict was met with little sympathy from the public. This was a crime that was difficult to understand, one that seemed driven solely by greed and a complete disregard for human life. For the next 5 years, Hickock and Smith sat on death row, hoping for a reprieve that never came. Appeals were filed, but in the end, the law was clear. Justice had to be served. On April 14, 1965, both men were hanged at the Kansas State Penitentiary. The execution marked the end of the Clutter family's tragic story, but the horror of that night would not soon be forgotten. The pain and loss experienced by the Clutter community were profound, and the town of Holcomb would never be the same again. The legacy, though the Clutter family's story ended in violence and heartbreak, it did not fade into obscurity. The murders sparked a nationwide conversation about the fragility of life, the dangers of unchecked violence, and the psychological profiles of those capable of such brutality. The tragedy of the Clutter family lived on through the pages of Truman Capote's groundbreaking book, In Cold Blood, which remains one of the most influential works in the true crime genre. In his book, Capote explored not only the chilling details of the crime, but also the minds of the killers. Hickock and Smith, once seen as mere criminals, were humanized through Capote's writing, and readers were forced to ask difficult questions about the nature of evil and the factors that drive a person to commit such horrific acts. The Clutter family, though gone, had become the central figures in a larger story, a cautionary tale about the dangers that can lurk in the most unsuspecting places. The crime was senseless, and the lives lost were precious. But in the end, it was the resilience of a small town that would never forget the Clutters and the legacy they left behind. In the wake of such a horrific event, one thing remains clear. The Clutter family was a victim of circumstances beyond their control. Their deaths were tragic, but their story continues to resonate, reminding us all of the fragile nature of life and the unpredictability of the world we live in. As Truman Capote once said, "In cold blood, there is no crime." Until next time, stay safe.